I had been at my cottage in Muskoka for 3 days with my grandson, Jake. He's 8, full of curiosity, full of energy. I was teaching him to fish the same way my father taught me 40 years ago. Early mornings on the dock, steaming coffee in my thermos, hot chocolate for him, watching the mist lift off the lake. That morning, we caught a pike big enough to hang on his bedroom wall. Jake couldn't stop smiling, chattering about it, while I silently cherished the peace of passing on a tradition. I had built that cottage myself back in 1995. 2 summers, weekends, holidays, every board, every nail, every detail. That's who I am. I'm Robert Miller, a contractor. 42 years building homes, raising a family, and now retired, hoping for quiet days with my grandson. But when I pulled into my driveway on Thursday afternoon, my heart sank. A construction dumpster sat on my lawn, the front door wide open. Power tools whirred, hammers banged, dust hung in the air. 2 contractors I had never seen were tearing down a wall, the wall between my bedroom and the spare room, my private sanctuary, gone. My home, the house I had raised my daughter in, the home I shared with Diana for the past 5 years, was under siege. "Who are you and what are you doing?" I asked, my voice steady but anger boiling beneath the surface. "Renovation project," one contractor said casually. Then Tyler appeared, my stepson, 28, hoodie expensive enough to cost more than my first car, designer sneakers, phone in hand. "Oh, you're back early," he said, not even looking up. "Diana said you'd be gone until Saturday." I looked at him, the man who had lived in my house rent-free for years, the man who had never held a steady job, the man who had treated my home and my money like a playground. And now he had crossed every line. "This is my house," I said quietly, with a calm that belied the storm inside me. "Stop working or I'm calling the police." Tyler finally looked up from his phone, smirking. "Relax." Diana approved this. "It's our house now." Our house. My house. Every memory, every nail, every corner I had cared for, claimed as if it belonged to him. I walked to the kitchen counter where I had left my mail. My credit card statement was there, open. $8,500 charged to it. Lumber, drywall, electrical supplies, contractor deposit. 3 days ago, while I was at the cottage with Jake. "Did you use my credit card?" I asked. "Diana gave it to me. We're family." "What's the big deal?" he said, as if that excused a blatant violation. I looked at him, the man-child who had never built anything, who played at being an entrepreneur online, who had lived in my house for 2 years without contributing. "The big deal is that this is my house," I said quietly. "I built it. My name is on the deed. And you just committed credit card fraud." He laughed. "Fraud? That's dramatic. It's a family expense." I called Diana. "Did you authorize Tyler to charge $8,000 to my credit card?" A pause. Then, he said he'd keep it reasonable. $8,000 isn't reasonable. And he tore down a wall, a load-bearing wall. By the time I hung up, the contractors were still there, tools in hand, confused. They were hired by Tyler. No permits, no plan, no understanding of what they were doing. I documented everything, the demolished wall, sagging ceiling, exposed wiring. I pulled out the blueprints, the original permits, the property deed. My home, my life's work, compromised in a matter of hours by entitlement and ignorance. I called my lawyer, Greg. He said it's straight, unauthorized credit card use, trespassing, property damage. I needed evidence, and I had it all. When Diana arrived, I showed her. She bit her lip, conflicted. This isn't about being difficult, I said. It's about law, safety, and responsibility. Tyler has made choices, and now he faces consequences. You can't protect him from reality. Tyler, of course, appeared in the do. The contractors finally packed up, muttering apologies. The older one handed me his business card. If you want it done properly, give me a call. I stood in my gutted bedroom, surveying the damage. 42 years of experience in construction had taught me how disasters like this start: cheap labor, no permits, and ignorance. But this was my home. My sanctuary. Tyler had turned it into a safety hazard in just a few hours. I called Tom, an old structural engineer friend. Load-bearing wall partially demolished, no support. What do I do? Emergency repair. Steel beam, support columns. Minimum $12,000 to $15,000, he said grimly. I reported the fraud to the credit card company, filed with the building inspector, and called my lawyer, Greg. Restraining order. Criminal charges. Tyler had to face the consequences. When Diana came home, she was defensive. Tyler's just trying to improve the house, she said. I led her to the bedroom. See the sag? That wall supports the roof. Without it, the house could collapse. And he charged $8,000 to my card without asking. Her face went pale. But he's my son. He made a mistake. When does a mistake become deliberate choices with consequences? I asked. I've spent $31,000 fixing what he broke. And now you ask me to protect him. Tyler appeared, red-faced, holding his phone. I'm filming this. My followers will love it. Entitled boomer kicks out stepson trying to succeed. This is my house, I said firmly. Turn off your phone. You cannot record here without consent. You are facing credit card fraud charges and property damage liability. And if you don't take responsibility, the legal system will handle it. Diana stepped between us, shaking. Both of you, stop. This isn't helping. No. I needed her to see the truth. Tyler made adult choices. He must face adult consequences. Diana left, going to Brady's with him. I stayed, documenting every detail, every blueprint, every photo of the damage. By morning, Tom and the building inspector arrived. The house was red-tagged. Unsafe to occupy. I packed essentials and drove to the cottage with Jake. 3 days of coordinating repairs, paying contractors, ensuring the steel beam and reinforcements met code. When it was done, Tyler had restitution to pay, a probation record, and a clear message: actions have consequences. Diana filed for divorce. I kept my home, my integrity, and my legacy intact. 6 months later, the house was repaired. Tom signed off, inspector removed the red tag. I moved back in, breathing relief with every step across the floor I had built myself. Diana sat silently in the living room. We need to talk, she said. I nodded. I've thought about this. I understand you're upset. I shook my head. I'm not upset. I'm done. I've spent 5 years watching you enable Tyler. Prioritizing his feelings over our marriage. Defending laziness, entitlement, irresponsibility. And now, I spent $31,000 fixing what he broke because he wanted better lighting for TikTok. Her face crumpled. He's my son. And that's why this won't work. I cannot be married to someone who chooses an adult son over their husband, who enables criminal behavior, who asks me to sacrifice my home and security. He made choices, he faces consequences. Diana moved out the next day, staying with Tyler. Tyler faced court, pled guilty, ordered to pay $31,000 restitution, and got probation. He got a real job at a call center. Diana remarried later. I heard Tyler's channel never took off. Christmas came. I spent it at the cottage with Emily and Jake. Ice fishing, hot chocolate, stories about Sarah, memories of family. Emily looked around. You built this, didn't you? Every plank, every board. And the house too, I said. Why didn't Diana get it? She asked. She saw things as assets, I saw them as legacy, I explained. I taught Jake carpentry, how to measure twice, cut once, respect structure. Buildings are like people, I told him. They have limits. Push too hard in the wrong place, and everything collapses. I smiled. My marriage was gone, but I kept my home, my self-respect, and my integrity. The lesson was clear: you cannot build anything lasting on a broken foundation. The next morning, I woke early, walked through the house I had built with my own hands, still covered in dust and plywood. Every corner reminded me of years of work, of love, of sacrifice. Tyler had left a trail of chaos, but I refused to let it break me. I called my lawyer, Greg, again. We move forward. Restraining order, restitution, police report. No exceptions, I said. He agreed, and I felt a weight lift. Finally, there was a plan, a path forward. Emily called later. Dad, I can't believe he did that. I'm sorry I wasn't here. I told her it wasn't her fault. She promised to come home for Christmas, to help keep the cottage alive with family traditions. I smiled, remembering teaching Jake to fish, seeing his excitement, his wonder at the world. That was the real legacy. I spent hours documenting everything: blueprints, photos, credit card statements. Every detail mattered. Years of expertise as a contractor had taught me that nothing was more important than evidence when you were protecting your home, your property, your life. Diana's call started, angry, pleading, then desperate. I ignored most of them. Tyler had made his choices, he would face the consequences. I would not enable him anymore. I had learned that lesson the hard way. By evening, the repairs were scheduled. The contractors confirmed materials, permits, engineers. The cost was steep, over $30,000, but it was my responsibility to make the house safe again. Not Tyler's. Not Diana's. Mine. As I locked the doors that night, I felt a strange peace. I had lost a marriage, but I had not lost myself. The house still stood. My work, my hands, my legacy, untouched by entitlement or carelessness. I looked out at the stars over the frozen lake. Life would continue. The next few days were a whirlwind of calls and coordination. The contractors worked tirelessly, guided by Tom, the structural engineer. Every beam, every support column was checked and double-checked. I supervised quietly, letting my years of experience speak through the work. Tyler's destruction had left a scar, but I refused to let it define my home. Emily arrived at the cottage with Jake. Seeing her, I felt a surge of gratitude. "Dad, I missed this," she said, looking around. I nodded. This was more than just repairs, it was about family, about teaching Jake, and even Emily, the value of responsibility and respect. We spent the afternoon reviewing blueprints and measurements, laughter mixing with the smell of pine from the fireplace. Meanwhile, the legal process moved forward. The police confirmed the credit card fraud report and issued Tyler a warrant. Greg filed the restraining order, ensuring he could not come near the property. Diana called repeatedly, but I refused to engage. Tyler's choices were his, and Diana had chosen to defend him. I couldn't control them, only my actions and my home. As I watched the contractors carefully reinforce the load-bearing wall, I reflected on everything I had built in my life. Houses, businesses, relationships, they all required solid foundations. Tyler had shown what happens when someone ignores responsibility. I couldn't protect him from himself, but I could protect what was mine. By the time evening fell, the wall stood strong, the house safe again. I looked at the work, the blueprints, the meticulous measurements. Years of experience, patience, and care had won. Tyler might have tried to destroy it, but he had not succeeded. My home, my rules, my legacy remained intact. The following morning, the building inspector arrived. He examined every detail, taking notes and photos. "This is a serious violation," he said, shaking his head. I handed over the blueprints, showing every load-bearing wall and support beam. The inspector nodded, impressed with my documentation. He red-tagged the property temporarily until all repairs were verified. I packed essentials for myself and Jake. We couldn't stay in the house, but the cottage was warm and familiar. Emily joined us for support, her presence a comfort amid the chaos. Sitting by the fireplace, I explained to Jake why walls and foundations matter, not just in buildings, but in life. "Respect the structure," I said, tracing the lines on the blueprint. "Push too hard in the wrong place, everything can collapse." Meanwhile, Tyler's social media posts went viral, but not in a flattering way. Friends and family reached out, warning me of online backlash. I didn't respond. My focus was repair, responsibility, and protecting my home. Legal action was underway, and I had all the documentation needed: credit card statements, photos, engineer's report, and contractor affidavits. Diana called again, pleading for me to drop charges. I listened quietly, then reminded her calmly, "This isn't about punishment. It's about accountability. He made choices with consequences. He must face them." She fell silent, realizing my stance would not waver. Tyler had created chaos, but I was determined to restore order, and the home I built would not suffer because of entitlement and laziness. By mid-morning, Tom, the structural engineer, arrived with his team. They carefully examined the demolished wall, measuring, calculating, and marking areas for the steel beam installation. "This is serious," Tom said. "Without immediate reinforcement, the roof load could cause a collapse, especially with winter coming." I nodded, feeling both frustration and resolve. This was my house, my responsibility. I coordinated with the contractors, making sure every measurement matched the original blueprints. Every beam, every support column, every safety detail had to be perfect. I couldn't leave anything to chance. The damage was severe, but repairable. Tyler's thoughtless actions had cost time, money, and trust, but they hadn't broken the foundation I had built with decades of work and care. Meanwhile, the credit card company reversed the $8,000 unauthorized charge after their investigation, confirming fraud. I filed a police report, and Greg, my lawyer, began drafting a restraining order against Tyler, ensuring he stayed at least 100 meters away from the property. Diana called repeatedly, oscillating between anger and pleading. I kept the conversation professional, unwavering. Tyler needed to face the consequences of his choices. Emily arrived in the afternoon to check on the progress. Seeing the chaos, she placed a hand on my shoulder. "Dad, I'm proud of how you're handling this," she said softly. I smiled, exhausted but determined. I had built homes for countless families, but this one mattered the most. It was my legacy, my history, and my responsibility. And I would protect it, no matter the cost. By evening, the temporary supports were in place, and the house felt a little more secure. I had spent the day overseeing the contractors, making sure every measurement and installation matched the blueprints. Each step reminded me why I had spent a lifetime building things properly, respecting structure, planning carefully, and never cutting corners. Tyler's reckless choices had undone years of care in a single weekend. Diana arrived later, her expression a mix of guilt and frustration. "Robert, can we talk?" she asked. I nodded. "I've already coordinated the repairs, contacted the engineer, filed the police report, and reported the fraud," I said calmly. "Now, we need to focus on solutions, not arguments." She hesitated, looking at the temporary support beams and the open wall. "I didn't realize how serious this was," she murmured. Emily called again that night, checking in. She wanted to know if I was okay, if the house would survive. I reassured her, explaining the measures we had taken, and she sounded relieved. Meanwhile, I reviewed every document, blueprints, permits, credit card statements, and insurance files. I documented every violation, every unauthorized action. If Tyler thought he could undo decades of work and get away with it, he was wrong. As night fell, I stood in the gutted bedroom, surveying the damage and the temporary supports. Dust hung in the air, tools scattered across the floor, but the structure held. My home, my legacy, would survive because I refused to compromise on integrity. The lesson was harsh, the cost high, but it was clear: actions have consequences, and even family members must be held accountable. The next morning, Tom, the structural engineer, arrived early. He walked through the house with a critical eye, measuring, inspecting, and calculating. His face was serious. "Robert, this is worse than I thought. That wall was carrying more load than you realized. Without proper support, the roof could fail, especially with winter approaching." I nodded, already aware of the stakes. "What's the fix?" I asked. Tom explained the emergency installation of a steel beam with reinforced support columns. The work would cost over $12,000 and needed to be done immediately. "Safety first," he said. "No shortcuts." Shortly after, the building inspector arrived. One glance at the exposed wall, the wiring, and the sagging ceiling made him pause. "Unlicensed contractors, no permits, this is a red tag situation. No one can occupy this house until repairs are complete," he said firmly. My home, my sanctuary, suddenly became off limits. I packed essentials for the cottage and informed Diana. She looked torn, conflicted, unable to reconcile her loyalty to Tyler with the reality of the situation. I left, feeling the weight of responsibility, knowing I had to protect my property and my integrity. That night, I called Greg, my lawyer, and reported every detail, every violation, every fraudulent charge. Tyler had crossed every line, and now he would face the consequences. Sitting in the cottage, I reflected on the chaos. I had spent decades building a life and a home meticulously, and in a matter of days, someone had tried to dismantle it all without regard. But no one could take away my knowledge, my experience, or my resolve. The house would survive. Tyler would learn that actions, no matter who commits them, have consequences. Over the next few days, the emergency repairs began. Tom's team worked tirelessly, installing the steel beam and supporting columns, ensuring every measurement was perfect. I documented everything: photos, notes, receipts, every piece of evidence for insurance, legal action, and future reference. I had to make sure nothing was left to chance. Diana called constantly, her tone shifting from anger to pleading. "Robert, please, don't press charges." Tyler scared. I listened but stayed firm. He needed to face the consequences of his choices. This wasn't about anger, it was about accountability. The law, safety, and respect for property could not be ignored, even for family. Meanwhile, I reported Tyler's fraudulent credit card charges to the bank. They confirmed an investigation and agreed to reverse the $8,000. Relief mixed with frustration, the financial cost was partially covered, but the structural damage and emotional strain couldn't be undone so easily. By the 5th day, most repairs were complete. The inspectors approved the work, confirming the house was safe. I returned, stepping into the restored space, feeling a mix of satisfaction and exhaustion. This was my home, and I had protected it. Tyler's actions had tested boundaries, but integrity had won. That evening, I reflected on the lessons learned. Life, like construction, required a solid foundation. Without it, even the smallest pressures could cause collapse. Trust, respect, and responsibility were pillars far stronger than wood or steel, and those pillars couldn't be ignored, even for family. Diana came home late that evening, hesitant, unsure how to face the mess. I explained calmly what had been done, what Tyler had caused, and what steps I had taken. Her eyes widened as she saw the steel beam and support columns, the photos of the demolished wall, and the credit card statements. For the first time, the gravity of Tyler's actions hit her. "This? I didn't realize how serious it was," she murmured. I didn't respond immediately. Words wouldn't fix the years of enabling. I needed her to understand boundaries, responsibility, and the consequences of ignoring them. Tyler had crossed every line. She sat at the kitchen table, the one I had built years ago, tracing the grain of the wood as if seeking comfort. "He's my son," she whispered. I nodded, understanding, but firm. "I know. But that doesn't change what he did. Actions have consequences." Diana, $8,000 charged without permission, a load-bearing wall torn down, illegal construction. This isn't about anger. This is about law, safety, and respect. She swallowed hard. "So, what now?" I looked at her, steady and resolute. "Tyler faces the legal system. He can make it right by paying back the money and covering the repairs, or he will face charges. I've reported the fraud, filed for a restraining order, and hired an engineer. Everything is documented." Her shoulders slumped. She realized there was no avoiding reality. This wasn't about loyalty to her son anymore, it was about protecting the home, the law, and the life I had built. She stayed quiet, letting the words sink in. That night, as I walked through the house, the repaired beam gleaming under the lights, I reflected on my life. Building homes, raising Emily, teaching Jake carpentry, everything required patience, planning, and respect for structure. Tyler's reckless actions had shaken that, but the foundation I had built, my integrity, my work, my commitment, remained solid. The next morning, I woke early, walking through the house to inspect every detail. The temporary plywood covering the demolished wall didn't reassure me, it was just a patch. I checked the exposed wiring, the sagging ceiling, and the steel beam that now carried the weight. Every piece of evidence reminded me how close this had come to disaster. I called Tom, the structural engineer, to review the work again and confirm that the house was safe. Diana stayed in the living room, silent. I could feel her tension, the weight of guilt pressing on her shoulders. She started, but I raised a hand gently. Not now. Let's focus on what needs to be done first. Tyler's choices have consequences. Our home needs to be safe before anything else. The building inspector arrived an hour later. I explained the situation, showed him the photos and the temporary supports. He shook his head, clearly impressed with the emergency measures, but firm. This is a red tag situation. No one can occupy this structure until it passes inspection. Load-bearing wall removed without permit, illegal construction, this is serious. I felt a pang in my chest. My home, my sanctuary, was now deemed unsafe because of Tyler. Diana's eyes met mine, a mixture of fear and realization. We'll have to stay at the cottage until repairs are complete, I said. She nodded, silent, finally understanding that enabling her son had consequences beyond just money. I spent the day organizing contractors, insurance paperwork, and documenting everything meticulously. Every photo, receipt, and note would be essential for legal purposes. By evening, the temporary repairs were in place, the cottage prepped for a week-long stay, and I finally allowed myself a moment to breathe. Sitting by the fireplace, I thought about the lessons I had tried to teach my family: responsibility, accountability, and respect for what you build. Tyler had learned none of these yet. But I knew that protecting what I had created, my home and my. Over the next few days, the house was a constant source of stress. Tom and his crew worked tirelessly, measuring, calculating, and reinforcing the load-bearing wall with steel beams and proper supports. Every day I documented the progress, taking notes and photos for insurance and legal purposes. Each snapshot of the repaired structure reminded me that my experience and foresight had prevented a potential disaster. Diana called several times, her tone shifting from anger to pleading. "Robert, can we just settle this without the police?" she asked. I listened calmly, explaining firmly that Tyler had committed fraud and endangered the house. "This isn't personal, Diana. It's law and safety. He made choices, and now he has to face the consequences. I'm protecting what's mine and what we've built together." Meanwhile, Tyler avoided me, posting online, claiming the evil stepdad was harassing him. I ignored the drama, focusing on the repairs and legal documentation. Each day, I felt the weight of the past 5 years, the money I'd spent supporting him, the patience I'd shown, and the constant enabling by Diana. It all culminated in this moment of accountability. By day 4, the critical structural repairs were complete. The building inspector returned, carefully examining the beams, supports, and permits. He nodded in approval. "House is safe. All code requirements met. You can reoccupy," he said, handing me the signed report. Relief washed over me. My home, my labor, my legacy was finally secure. That evening, I sat in the living room with Diana. She was subdued, quiet for the first time. I explained that Tyler's restitution and the legal consequences were necessary. "I can't ignore what happened, Diana. I won't compromise the integrity of my home, or my life, for someone unwilling to respect the rules." She finally absorbed it, a small nod acknowledging reality. I looked around the room, dust still lingering, but the structure solid. Years of experience and patience had saved the home I built. I felt a mixture of exhaustion and pride. Protecting your foundation isn't just about wood and steel, it's about principle, responsibility, and respect. Tyler may learn that later, but I had made my stand. Tyler stayed away, sulking at Brady's, while Diana finally realized the extent of the chaos he'd caused. The house felt quiet, almost peaceful, for the first time in years. I went through every corner, inspecting the repairs, making sure nothing was overlooked. The steel beam glinted in the evening light, a silent testament to what could have gone wrong if I hadn't intervened. I contacted the credit card company again to confirm the reversal and ensure Tyler's fraudulent charges were fully handled. Then, I filed the police report. It was uncomfortable, but necessary. A 28-year-old adult couldn't be excused for breaking the law simply because he was family. Diana tried calling again, her voice pleading. I explained once more, calmly, that the consequences were not negotiable. Actions have results, and Tyler had to face them. Emily called from Vancouver, sensing the tension. "Dad, are you okay?" she asked. I reassured her, but I couldn't hide my frustration. She understood. She'd witnessed Tyler's irresponsibility before and knew the pattern. For the first time, I felt supported by someone who truly understood the importance of accountability. That evening, I sat with Jake, teaching him carpentry. He watched intently as I measured, marked, and cut wood, explaining why precision mattered. "Why do you always say respect the structure, Grandpa?" he asked. I smiled. "Because, Jake, buildings are like people. Push too hard in the wrong place, and everything can collapse." Tyler learned that the hard way. Looking at him, I realized that my lessons weren't just about carpentry, they were about life. Integrity, responsibility, and respect. While Tyler had to learn through mistakes, I was shaping the next generation with wisdom. Wisdom and care. My home was safe, my family slowly finding balance, and I finally felt a sense of closure. The next morning, the house felt different. Quiet. Orderly. I moved through the repaired rooms, inspecting every detail, making sure the steel beam was secure and all electrical wiring properly redone. The contractors had done a professional job, but the memory of Tyler's reckless demolition lingered. Every scar reminded me how quickly entitlement could threaten everything you built. Diana came over, hesitant. She stayed near the doorway, her expression conflicted. "Robert, I know you're right," she admitted softly. "But I can't help feeling guilty about Tyler." I nodded, understanding her motherly instincts, but this wasn't about guilt, it was about responsibility. Being a parent sometimes means saying no, Diana. Even when it hurts. Tyler has to face the consequences of his choices. We didn't speak much after that. I had work to do, filing police reports, confirming the credit reversal, coordinating with the engineer to finalize the repairs. Emily called again. "Dad, can I come for Christmas this year?" Her voice was full of hope. I smiled. "Of course, Emily. And bring Jake. We'll fish, build, and make it a real family holiday." By evening, the house felt whole again. The sunlight streamed through the windows, glinting off the beam that now held the roof safely in place. I walked through each room slowly, thinking about all the years I'd invested, the memories, the blood, sweat, and tears. Nothing was more valuable than respect for the home, for the law, and for the people who lived in it. Tyler's lessons were hard, but mine were enduring. I sat in the living room, looking at the photos of Sarah, Emily, and Jake. The house was mine, built with care, and no amount of entitlement could erase that. For the first time in weeks, I felt peace. The foundation of my home, and of my life, was secure again, not just the walls, but the values that shaped it. Days passed, and the house gradually returned to normal. The contractors left, the dust cleared, and the smell of fresh paint lingered in the air. I moved from room to room, checking every corner, every fixture. Each repair reminded me of Tyler's recklessness, but also of my resilience. 42 years as a contractor had taught me one thing: anything worth building deserves patience and care. Emily arrived with Jake for Christmas. Seeing them filled the house with warmth I hadn't realized I missed. Jake ran through the hallways, laughing, while Emily hugged me tightly. "Dad, it's beautiful here," she said, looking around. I smiled, thinking about all the times I'd painstakingly built this house, and how it had survived storms, time, and now, Tyler's chaos. We spent the day fishing through the ice and drinking hot chocolate, just like old times. I taught Jake how to measure wood, explaining the importance of precision. "Why do we measure twice, Grandpa?" he asked. I chuckled. "Because buildings, and people, have limits. Push too hard in the wrong place, and everything falls apart. Just like Tyler's wall." Evenings were quiet. I sat by the fireplace, looking through old blueprints and photos, reflecting on the past. I'd lost a marriage, faced betrayal, and dealt with entitlement head-on. Yet I still had my dignity, my home, and my family who truly mattered. Tyler's mistakes had shaken me, but they hadn't broken me. The house, now fully repaired, stood as a testament to endurance. Every beam, every wall, every nail held more than structure, they held lessons. Lessons about respect, responsibility, and boundaries. As I watched the snow fall outside, I felt a sense of completion. Not just of repairs, but of reclaiming what truly mattered: my life, my values, my legacy. The following weeks were peaceful. Tyler stayed away, thanks to the restraining order, and Diana had moved out, leaving me space to think clearly. I focused on the cottage and the simpler joys of life, teaching Jake carpentry, spending quiet mornings by the frozen lake, and planning small repairs that didn't involve legal headaches. Emily visited often. She helped me organize old blueprints and shared stories about her life in Vancouver. "Dad, I never realized how much work you put into everything," she said one afternoon. I smiled, thinking about the house, the cottage, and all the projects that had shaped my life. It wasn't just about the buildings, it was about legacy. "It's not just the structures, Emily. It's about respect for what you build, the effort, the care," I explained. Jake's curiosity grew each day. He learned to measure, cut, and assemble small wood projects. I emphasized patience and precision. "Grandpa, this is fun." "I get why you always say to respect the structure," he said, holding up a tiny model cabin. I nodded. "Exactly. Buildings are like people. Understand their limits and treat them right. Push too hard in the wrong spot, and everything falls apart." Tyler's social media presence slowly faded. His channel never recovered, and the calls from Diana stopped. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The lesson had been learned in reality, not online views. I kept focusing on what mattered: my home, my family, and the integrity I'd fought to preserve. Evenings by the fireplace became my sanctuary. I revisited old memories, the life I had built from scratch, and the values I refused to compromise. This house, every beam, every wall, every blueprint, reminded me of my journey. The challenges I faced with Tyler had tested more than my patience, they had tested my principles. And I had upheld them. Looking at the snow-covered roof, I realized something crucial: a solid foundation, in life or in construction, is priceless. It takes work, vigilance, and respect. Christmas arrived, and for the first time in years, the cottage was filled with warmth and laughter. Emily flew home, excited to spend time with Jake and me. We decorated the small cabin together, strung lights around the windows, and made a feast that smelled of cinnamon and pine. It wasn't a grand celebration, but it was ours, simple and real. I watched Emily and Jake laugh as they built a miniature wooden sleigh. Memories of Sarah flickered in my mind, a bittersweet reminder of the life we once shared. I realized that though I had lost a marriage and endured betrayal, I had gained something invaluable: peace, clarity, and the ability to protect what mattered most. I also began to reflect on Tyler's fate. He had learned a harsh lesson, facing restitution, probation, and the reality of adult responsibility. I didn't feel satisfaction in his punishment, rather, I felt relief that the law and my boundaries had reinforced a necessary truth: actions have consequences. Diana's choices had cost me a relationship, but they hadn't taken my home, my values, or my sense of self. Over the following weeks, I focused on small projects at the cottage. I built a workbench for Jake, repaired the old dock, and reinforced the cabin walls against winter storms. Each project was a reminder of the pride that comes from effort and skill. Teaching Jake became a joy and a legacy in itself. I could see him absorbing lessons about patience, precision, and respect, not just for wood, but for life. Late one evening, sitting by the fire, I reflected on the events of the past months. I had faced betrayal, damage, and the collapse of trust, yet I remained intact. The house I built, the lessons I taught, and the integrity I maintained were my victories. I realized that building a solid foundation in life required more than bricks and beams; it required boundaries, honesty, and courage. And so, as the snow fell outside the cottage windows, I felt a quiet satisfaction. Life had tested. In the following months, life settled into a new rhythm. The cottage became our sanctuary. Emily and Jake visited frequently, and we spent our days outdoors, fishing, chopping wood, or simply sitting on the dock watching the mist lift off the lake. Those early mornings reminded me of my father, teaching me patience, skill, and respect for what we built with our own hands. I started taking on small renovation projects for neighbors, not for profit, but for the joy of building. Each project reminded me of why I had spent 42 years as a contractor, the pride of creating something lasting. I worked carefully, meticulously, thinking not just of the immediate task but of the life the structure would hold. Jake loved helping, learning to measure twice and cut once, to respect the wood and the design. It was more than carpentry, it was a lesson in life. Occasionally, Emily would ask about Tyler and Diana. I told her the truth gently: Tyler had faced the consequences of his actions, Diana had chosen her own path, and I had chosen mine. Life is not always fair, but integrity and effort carry their own rewards. Emily understood. She laughed, played, and learned alongside her brother, and I realized that this was the legacy that truly mattered. Evenings were quiet, filled with the soft crackle of the fireplace and the distant call of loons over the frozen lake. I reflected on everything that had happened: the betrayal, the destruction, the anger, and the lessons learned. I realized that the pain and conflict had clarified what was important: family, honesty, responsibility, and the structures we build, whether of wood or trust. As I tucked Jake into bed one night, he looked up at me with wide eyes. "Grandpa, when I grow up, can I build something as big as your house?" I smiled, ruffling his hair. "Yes, Jake. But remember, everything you build, you must respect. People, places, and even the things you create, they all have limits. Push too hard in the wrong place, and it all falls apart." He nodded solemnly, understanding more than his age suggested. I felt a deep sense of peace. I had weathered the storm, protected my legacy, and passed it on to the next generation. And in that moment, I knew I had truly won. The next morning, I returned to the cottage early. The frost still clung to the edges of the lake, and the sun barely touched the horizon. I brewed coffee, poured hot chocolate for Jake, and we sat quietly on the dock. Silence carried its own lessons, a contrast to the chaos that had consumed my house months ago. I reflected on the choices I had made, standing up to Tyler, holding Diana accountable, and defending the home I built with my own hands. It had cost me relationships and money, but it had preserved my dignity and my integrity. I realized that sometimes, doing the right thing is not popular, not easy, but absolutely necessary. Life had a way of testing your boundaries, showing you who you really are. Jake chattered about the pike we had caught last summer, about building a new dock, and about the tiny cabin he wanted to construct in the backyard. I listened, offering guidance, letting him make small decisions while teaching him responsibility. I could see in his eyes the spark my father had seen in me decades ago. Legacy isn't only about buildings, it's about the values we pass on. By noon, I began small repairs around the cottage. Loose boards, squeaky hinges, minor wear and tear. These were easy fixes, but each gave me a sense of control and accomplishment. Every hammer strike reminded me of years spent building homes, businesses, and a life rooted in hard work and respect for structure. Emily arrived with Jake, carrying a basket of supplies and snacks. She smiled as she looked around, appreciating the space we had carved out for family and learning. "Dad," she said, "this is perfect. You made this feel like home." Her words carried warmth and reassurance. That evening, after Jake went to bed, I sat on the cottage porch watching the sky turn deep blue, stars beginning to emerge. I thought about Tyler, Diana, and the mess left behind in my house. It wasn't just the structural damage, it was the betrayal, the lack of respect, and the failure to see consequences as lessons. I realized I had to accept that some people won't change until they face the results of their actions. I opened my notebook and began drafting a plan for the house. Not just repairs, but upgrades I had been putting off for years. I wanted this home to last another 40 years, to be safe, secure, and a place where memories could be built properly. Every note I made, every sketch, reminded me of why I had chosen to become a contractor in the first place, to create something enduring, something solid. Emily knocked softly and stepped onto the porch, holding a cup of tea. "Dad," she said quietly, "I know things have been rough, but you did the right thing. Tyler had to learn, and you protected what mattered." Her voice held pride, understanding, and a hint of relief. I nodded, appreciating her perspective. Sometimes, the younger generation sees clarity when those closest are blinded by emotion. We sat in silence for a while, letting the evening calm settle over us. The wind whispered across the frozen lake, and I felt the weight of the past months lift slightly. This was my life, my home, and my responsibility. It wasn't about anger or revenge, it was about setting boundaries, respecting the rules, and teaching lessons that would last longer than any fleeting confrontation. I thought about Jake again. He would grow up seeing the importance of integrity, the value of hard work, and the consequences of careless actions. That legacy mattered more than any argument, more than any online following, more than money or fleeting popularity. And as I watched Emily smile at the lake, I knew that, for the first time in months, Months passed after the repairs. The house finally felt like mine again, safe and solid. The roof above, the steel beam supporting the wall, every corner reminded me that I had reclaimed what was rightfully mine. Emily and Jake visited more often now. Jake loved learning carpentry, measuring, sawing, hammering, and understanding why every piece mattered. "Grandpa, why do you always say respect the structure?" he asked one afternoon. I smiled, wiping sawdust from my hands. "Buildings are like people, Jake. You need to know their limits, what they can carry and what they can't. Push too hard in the wrong place, and everything collapses." He nodded solemnly, understanding more than most adults ever did. I sold the big house eventually, getting a good price, and bought a smaller, manageable home closer to the cottage. No memories of Tyler or Diana tainted it, just peace and the freedom to live on my terms. Tyler's TikTok dreams didn't pan out. He works a call center now, making restitution payments. Diana remarried. I heard she has stepchildren and perhaps has learned a little about responsibility, or maybe not. I don't dwell on that. I focus on the legacy I can control. Teaching Jake, building, seeing him respect the craft, that's what matters. The lessons my father taught me, the homes I built with my own hands, the life I preserved through decades of work, all of it matters more than social media fame or shortcuts. $31,000 and 63 years taught me the cost of boundaries, respect, and standing firm. My home, my values, my life, protected, restored, and mine. And when I see Jake's small hands measuring wood, his bright eyes focused on the task, I know I've passed on something that will outlast every fleeting trend, every entitled mistake. Some foundations, real ones, never break. As I watched Jake hammer his first nail into the wood, I realized something. Life, like a house, is built on foundations, some visible, some hidden. Tyler may have ignored the rules, Diana may have chosen comfort over truth, but I had my foundation intact, my integrity, my legacy, my home. And that's something no one can take away. Sometimes, the hardest walls to rebuild aren't made of wood or steel, they're made of respect, trust, and lessons learned the hard way. But when you get it right, the structure lasts forever. And I smiled, knowing one thing for sure: you can't build anything solid on a broken foundation, but you can teach the next generation to do it better.